Hi, welcome to Cubs and Culture for January 16th, 2018. I think this is going to only be one segment today because of how tired I am because of being on third shift. Yay! I also was intending to talk about this yesterday, as in Monday, because that was Martin Luther King Day. Um, Sports are often held up as sort of the place in which merit is the only thing that matters in our society. And so there's no sort of like institutional racism. And that's not really true. So, because it was Martin Luther King Day, I wanted to talk about just some issues on this front with Major League Baseball. And also especially since with the Jackie Robinson story, there's I always forget the exact day, but it was sometime in there. It's the day Jackie Robinson broke the color barrier, where everyone wears 42. And the thing is, a bit like Martin Luther King Day, Jackie Robinson Day is just sort of an empty gesture, because if you don't notice about Robinson, he actually became very, very bitter towards the end of his life about the lack of progress, especially around coaches and managers being people of color being allowed to be coaches and managers. Jackie Robinson Day, like Martin Luther King, just feel like empty gestures to me. And I guess, like, as a gesture, they're sort of nice, but I'd rather see more substantial changes in the just culture. And being actually, instead of saying we're inclusive, actually being inclusive. Okay, so in terms of the demographics of baseball players, roughly speaking, in any given year, about 60% of the players are white and 40% of the players are people of color, with the largest group, of course, being Latino, because in the way in which the international farm system works, it's Latino players from Puerto Rico or Mexico or Venezuela or Cuba or what's another Colombia, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. They're all cheaper, just because of the happenstance of history. They're all sort of cheaper than African American counterparts. Because in the way in which this imperialism and everything else is structured. So then about 8% of the players are African American, and about 2% are Asian or other. But the thing is, if you look, okay, so on every single team for coaching, you have basically, some teams do this slightly differently, and you might have one or two slots that are changes, but you always have a manager and a bench coach, who are sort of 1 and 2. Then you have a pitching coach, a hitting coach, a third base coach, and a first base coach, and a bullpen coach. Those are the 7 standard positions. So if you think about this, if there's 30 teams, you have 210 coaching positions. Now, I very briefly looked, and as far as I can tell, next year, there's going to be, for coaching positions, only 30 of them. There's 210 and there's 30 of them, so about 14% are going to be people of color. But again, the player population is 40%, and so that's a huge disparity. For managers, it gets a little bit worse in that there's only 4 managers of color: Dave Roberts, Dave Martinez, who actually replaced Dusty Baker. So the number just stays the same because a Latino manager is replacing a black manager. Then you have Alex Cora. So you have Roberts, Martinez, Cora, and then Ritanera of the White Sox. So that's only 4. It's not inconceivable that Dusty Baker will get another one, so that would be 5. So you have 5 of 30, which is about 15%. But here's the thing, especially for a third base coach, where basically you're just reading a play and telling people when to go. I do not believe for a second that there are not capable players of color who are retiring or anything like that, where they can't handle the responsibility of being a third base coach. And so it's pretty obvious to me, because of this disparity between the player population and the coaching population, that there has to be some sort of unconscious or institutional bias. Now, the other sort of thing, and I sort of hinted at this, is, look, minor leaguers, there's a hell of a lot of baseball that happens in minor league. And there's a ton of players who aren't first-round drafts or anything like that. So let me give you a quick example. Baez was drafted 9 overall. This is why his number is 9. And his bonus signing money was $2.9 million. So unless he was a complete moron with his money, he was set up for life. Okay, but that level of signing bonus doesn't happen. So you have someone like Carl Edwards Jr., who's taken in the 36, something like that. Very, very late round. I think actually 46. His signing bonus was $5,000. So, minor leaguers as a whole are paid below minimum wage. It's very much like the adjunct system for college professors. And the reason for that is, all teams, to run a baseball team effectively, you need at least 20, 25 guys. So every single level so for every player at the major league level, there's 5 or 6 people who are behind him, filling the same role in the organization. And so because of this, if they played every single player $2.9 million as their signing bonus, it would just cut into profits, and then capitalistic isn't allowed to do it. So a lot of times, unless you are a domestic draft in the first 10 or so rounds, if you are a minor leaguer, it's a very hard life, in that you end up being paid basically poverty level wages. There's actually an ongoing lawsuit about whether or not they need to be paid overtime, and around this issue. So for most minor leaguers, it's basically 2 groups of people. It's white guys from suburban who have familial structures, who can try to live out their major league dream because their family is willing to help support them for a few years while they're trying to make it in baseball. Okay, so it's basically 3 groups. It's high draft picks who get huge signing bonuses, and then they don't need to worry about money. Then the next sort of population are guys who may or may not make it, but they have the support structure of their family, so they're able to try this for a few years, like kind of going to college. And again, with the vast majority of these people are white. And then there's a whole other group of people, a lot of them immigrant workers or Latino players who, if they get a 50,000 signing bonus, which can happen for some levels of the international draft, that's enough for it's worthwhile given the economic disparity between them and between the United States and Venezuela, for example. So the risk of trying to make it in America in baseball is worth living in poverty level wages. So there's this huge sort of issue, and I've looked at multiple studies. And there's this issue about Latino players, especially being underpaid for their contributions, because in general, minor leaguers are underpaid for what they're actually doing. But for Latino players, it gets much, much worse, and it's kind of even comes out at the national, at the major league levels. And I've seen several studies where white players in free agency get 60% of the money, but only provide 54% of the wins. So they're overpaid. And then whatever the numbers are ends up being systematically that even at the major league level, Latino players are paid 18% lower. So there's this. So things like Martin Luther King or Jackie Robinson's Day, I really like it's depressing to me that everyone thinks that they're held up as these celebrations, and but it just feels empty. So like when we have true sort of integration in coaching staff or front offices are also another issue where it's not really well integrated. Then maybe Jackie Robinson Day won't feel just empty to me. So I just want to quickly say I'm on third shift. This was probably very rambling, but basically I wanted to point out that Latino players are systematically exploited, especially at the minor league level, because of sort of institutional racism. And like people need to think about that, and especially like I don't for a second believe that there has to be that many white guys as like fucking Chip Hale, potato sack Chip Hale was allowed to manage the Diamondbacks for one season. I can't believe, like, god damn it, like god damn it, with how much of the league is Latino, and even makes sense that managers and coaches should be bilingual in English and Spanish, just because of the nature of the number of Latin players. So it's very, very frustrating to me that this is happening, and now I'm absolutely rambling. So have a good night. Cubs and Culture out for January 16th, 2018.